My uncle left me a shifty little bar in his will. One of the regulars told me he had a doppelganger. Not a lot of people visiting my bar are completely normal, well-adjusted individuals. It took me a long time getting on the same wavelength with most of our regulars, but I'll never forget the day I had my first encounter with one of them. This happened when I was still quite green, as you'll see. His name was Cole. He'd been coming to the bar a lot since we'd opened up again, but Andrick said he hadn't seen him around that often before. A few times, yes, but he didn't know anything about him, save for his name. Cole would never talk to anyone. He'd keep his head low and order drinks in a rough, quiet voice. He stuttered a lot. Once he'd received his beverage of choice, he'd sit down in the emptiest corner of the new saloon, where he'd stay for up to 4 hours. I'd watch him from time to time. His head would always be hovering just a few inches above the table, his eyes half closed. I felt sad for him. He looked sort of defeated, although I didn't know by whom or what. The fact that he drank a little more with every visit concerned me. I knew it wasn't my place to snoop around in my patrons' lives, but I didn't have to be intrusive. All I wanted to know is whether he was okay. So one time when I handed him his beer, I simply asked. He stared at me for a split second, his eyes wide and watery, before he broke down sobbing. He tried to keep it in at first, but eventually buried his face in his palms, tears dripping down his chin. I handed him a napkin before rounding the counter and walking over to him, waving for Andrick to take over for a little while. "It's none of my business," I began cautiously. "But if you want to talk." "Yeah," he breathed. "That might help." I nodded and we went back over to his corner booth. Glancing around, I assured myself nobody else was in earshot before sitting down across from him. I didn't have to prod for him to begin. "I'm gonna kill someone very soon. He's taken everything from me, that SOB. But honestly, I'm scared." He lowered his voice. "This thing, it's not..." "Wait, slow down," I said softly. "What's he taken from you?" "Simply everything. My house, my job, my wife. It all started when I came home late from work to see the same car I own already parked in my driveway. The exact same one, right down to the license plate. I went inside the house planning to ask my wife about it, but then I heard something. My wife's voice, but also another man's. I could hear them from downstairs in the living room when I came in. I sneaked up to the bedroom, opened the door, and there they were. My wife and me." "You?" I repeated, frowning in confusion. Cole shrugged and took a sip of his drink. "Not me, of course, but he looked just like me. He had the same birthmark on his back. He even sounded like me. I've heard my voice recorded before, so while I didn't realize it right away, he was just like mine. And before you ask, I don't have a twin or anything. The instant I saw him, I knew he wasn't human. He was something else. I didn't know what, but either way, the two of them hadn't noticed me. And once I'd gotten a look at him, I was too shocked to speak up anymore. Weak reaction, I know, but what was I supposed to do? So I went back outside, and after a bit of thinking, I decided to call the police. But when I told them that there was someone in my house who looked exactly like me and that I was scared, they just hung up. Granted, I probably sounded like I was drunk or high or something. I was not, you should know that. I've never had any problems with my mental health either. That was just the beginning, though. I'm not a confrontational kind of guy, and I wasn't just gonna barge in there. I was afraid, and then of course there's the fact that he literally managed to trick my wife into... I know I should have done something right away, but I just couldn't. I ended up letting it happen. That and so much more. I slept in my car that night, parked somewhere in public since my spot at home was occupied. Cole let out a dry laugh and emptied his glass. You must think I'm crazy. I was staring at him with my mouth agape. I'm not sure what I expected to hear, but this was not it. This was terrifying. I believed him, though. Knowing where Andrick and the others working at the bar came from, the concept of doppelgangers didn't really seem groundless. I shook my head. "I believe you," I replied quietly, my voice raw from my parched throat. I was starting to feel like I needed a drink as well. "Go on." Cole raised an eyebrow in disbelief before taking a shaky breath. "When I came into work the next day, he was already there. He was sitting at my desk, reading through the papers stacked up there. I watched him for a little while. I kind of felt like something was draining from me, maybe my energy or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm not good at storytelling, but I suddenly felt hopeless. That's what I'm trying to say. I waited in the corridor outside my office for someone to come by. I wanted to talk to my coworkers. Surely they'd noticed there were two of me. When the place got more crowded, they did come by, but they all just ignored me. And then I realized it. My wife hadn't noticed either. Even though I'd been standing in the doorway right across from her, nobody I knew was noticing me. When I turned to look back at the other me sitting in the office, he looked right at me. The only one to look at me in the eyes in that entire building. And he smiled. Again, I did nothing. I simply went back to my car and drove around, crying like a baby. I remembered the new saloon, and that's how I ended up at your bar again. See, I have nothing else to do anymore, and no one to talk to either. I don't have any siblings, my parents live overseas, and I don't have any friends who'd stand with me in this. Even if I had, they would have probably forgotten about me by now as well, that this is the only place for me." He sighed and raised his glass. It was empty, but I smiled at the gesture, though sadly. Cole tried to smile back, but his lip was quivering. "It's warmer here than in my car, and drinks are cheap, so I can just forget about everything for a little while. Besides, you guys here don't know me, and since only strangers seem to acknowledge my existence anymore, I'm grateful for at least being alive here, being a person here or whatever. This thing pushed me out of my own life. I don't even dare to walk by my own house anymore because of how much it scares me. I still have access to my bank account, but who knows how long that's going to last." I chimed in, "So now you want to kill him?" "Of course," he replied. "It's the only way. No clue what he is, but I bought a gun from some shady guy selling weapons underhand, and I'm just going to fire until that thing isn't moving anymore. I've been waiting for too long already. Once he's dead, I'll take over again. I didn't have much of a life, but I was with the woman I love, and I earned enough money to afford some luxury. My life wasn't busy or glamorous or anything like that, but it was good. And it was mine." I nodded. I didn't know what to say, so I offered to let him sleep at the bar that night since it was warm in there at least. Cole shook his head no. "I appreciate it, but I have to start looking for a chance to, it'll be difficult. I need to do it somewhere no one else sees, and I need to keep my wife from finding out. I don't want her to know. Maybe I should tell her. Maybe I will, someday. But she'll have a complete meltdown, and I just want to keep her safe. I'll be missing out on a lot of sleep from now on, and I won't be showing up here as often anymore, but this has to be my priority now until it's done." "Is there anything else I can help you with?" I asked. "No," he said. "I really don't want to drag anyone else into this mess. Who knows what's going to happen? But for what it's worth, thank you. It was nice having somebody listen to me, and looking me in the eyes, I suppose." He rose from his seat and handed me the money for his drink directly. I watched as he left, his jacket pulled tight around his shoulders. He gave me a quick glance before he disappeared through the door, the tiniest of smiles on his lips. "Good luck," I called after him, catching a few surprised looks from my other patrons. Smiling awkwardly, I got up and walked over to Andrick, who was just in the process of drawing off a clean glass. He raised his brows quizzically. "It's nice to see you getting to know your regulars, but you don't always have to take that long. You don't have to play therapist for whoever comes in here," he told me. I sighed as I joined him behind the counter. I wasn't playing therapist. This guy really needed someone to listen to him. He's got a bit of a situation. Say, Do you know anything about imposters, like doppelgangers? Andric tilted his head. Well, a doppelganger doesn't always have to be just that. Usually an encounter with one is said to be bad luck, so in a way, they're harbingers of misfortune. However, what you mean is basically like an evil twin that can be anything. He rubbed the glass in his hands with a thoughtful look on his face. Any being able to mimic something or someone else can set its sights on you and try to push itself into your life. However, very few succeed. It'd have to be powerful to deceive its victim's entire social circle. I mean, you'd have to get every detail about them down cold. And what if it can do that? And can it copy a person's belongings too? Like a car or anything like that? It'd have to be even more powerful to do that, Andric replied. Oh, by the way, I'll gladly tell you anything I know, but since your questions are very specific, I'm guessing this has to do from your friend earlier. I nodded quietly. Care to share exactly what he told you? I'd rather not for now, but can you kill something like what you just described, like with a gun? Andric let out a mirthless chuckle. If you could, life would be so much easier for folk like me, but no, most certainly not. I dropped the cleaning rag I'd absent-mindedly been wiping the counter with and rushed outside, my heels clacking on the wooden floor. I burst through the door, ran past Blow, who flinched upon seeing me dash by, and called out Cole's name, shouting for him to come back. I walked the length of the street trying to find him. I had to warn him somehow. But if what Andric said was true, he wouldn't stand a chance. Maybe he could start anew somewhere else instead. It'd beat dying at the hands of that shapeshifter. After half an hour, I realized I wasn't going to find him. My head low, I returned to the new saloon. When I came in, Andric was still where I'd left him, but he now had an almost sympathetic look on his face. I took position beside him again. Go do something else, please, I muttered. I've got this. I just wanted to be alone with my thoughts for a bit. I listened to the sounds of people chattering as I dried off glasses and cups, tidied up behind the counter, and gave out drinks. I didn't know Cole very well, but I'm the type of person that gets kind of invested, I guess. At least I used to be back when this happened. I overheard May whispering something to Danica as they strolled by. I can't believe Mac left us someone this weepy. Or it was something to the tune of that. That just added to my mood. For 2 weeks, I waited for Cole to return. I hadn't asked him to, but I was sure he'd come by to let me know he was all right if he were to succeed. I was very busy with the bar and everything, but he was always on my mind, albeit in the back. And then, one day, completely out of the blue, Cole came marching through the door, his arm around the waist of a beautiful, well-dressed woman. My heart took a leap and I beamed at the two of them, my chest light with relief. Hello, Cole, I said, barely able to contain the excitement in my voice, but keeping it cool since he had who I assumed to be his wife with him. After all, she wasn't supposed to find out about the whole incident. Long time no see. What can I get you? Hello, he replied, drawing out the word. I could see a hint of confusion in his eyes. I thought this was your first time here, the lady muttered into his ear. He nodded but kept smiling politely. I frowned. Why didn't he recognize me? Furthermore, while he could have easily forgotten about what I looked like, why wouldn't he remember the bar? He'd been here time and time again during the course of the evil twin ordeal. It took me longer than I cared to admit to put the pieces together in my head. During that time, all I did was stand and stare, dumbly, as the realization gradually started to set in and my stomach slowly sank. Suddenly, I felt a warm hand on my shoulder. Turning around, I found Andric standing next to me. He eyed the couple over, but it was obvious he was focused more on the man. Cole was beginning to look rather uncomfortable, almost angry. Eventually, Andric raised his other hand and pointed at a sign behind us on the wall. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. This is a joke, right? Cole asked. It's not. Would you please leave now? Andric's voice was sharp. I was starting to get nervous. To my surprise, he squeezed my shoulder upon feeling it tremble. You know you just can't throw out anyone, right? We didn't do anything. Not you, as in the two of you, but as in just you. The lady may stay if she wants to. What did I do? Do I smell? Cole let out an incredulous laugh as he glanced around the bar, almost like he was looking for support among the other patrons. What did you do to him? I pressed out. It wasn't a smart thing to ask outright, but I just had to. Is he alive? I don't know what you're talking about. Andrew cleared his throat. As you can see, your presence is distressing her. Please leave. Now. He said this with a deadpan look on his face, his voice flat and steady. Cole's wife looked at us like we were crazy, but I could almost see an angry gleam in the eyes of the imposter as he turned around and made for the door, mumbling something to the lady about how nuts we were. Wait, I screamed, realizing this was my last chance to warn her. That man is not your husband. The lady turned around, giving me an odd look, but she didn't stop. Instead, she picked up her pace a little, approaching the exit in a hurry. That's not Cole, I shouted, frantically trying to get the words out. He's dangerous, I felt Andrick cover my mouth with his hand, pulling me away from the counter and grabbing one of my flailing arms with his other one. You're gonna get it angry, he hissed into my ear. I struggled, trying to get over to the woman, but Andrick was stronger than he looked. By the time he let go of me, Cole's wife was gone. I looked around. None of the patrons had gotten up during my screaming fit. Like, they hadn't even noticed the crazy chick going off at all. Andrick had a bitter smile on his face. You want to know the kicker? This happens like thrice a year around here. I still remember a very short letter my uncle left me that kind of relates to what happened back there. It read, quote, Dear Julia, you're nobody's savior. If you try to be, you'll either get hurt yourself or you'll see someone you care about get hurt. Both suck. Keep your distance. Sincerely, your Uncle Mac.